typical flower. Flower is one of the most important features of the angiosperms. All the flowering plants around the earth is belonging to the family called as division called as angiospermae. Angiospermae is otherwise called as Magnoliphyta or Anthophyta. Angiospermae is otherwise called as Magnoliphyta or Anthophyta, which is considered to be the sister group of the gymnosperms. Over 95% of all the plants present on the earth's surface is the angiosperms. So, angiosperms dominates the earth's surface and they have a lot of economic importance. Like these angiosperms are used in cosmetics, medicines, decorative purpose, industries, extraction of secondary metabolites, etc. So, study of angiosperms or the flowering plants is very important. What is a flower? Flower is one of the most obvious and distinguished features of the angiosperms. As we studied in our last session, it is a modification of the shoot where the shoot apical meristem is modified into the flower where the internodes are reduced or condensed to form a disc-like thick structure called as the thalamus on which the floral parts are arranged. The floral parts are arranged in four different orals in concentric rings. Four different orals in concentric rings. The outermost oral is called as the calyx. The second oral is called as the corolla. Third oral is the gynoecium or the male reproductive organ bearing structures. The fourth oral, the innermost oral, is called as the gynoecium, which is the female reproductive structure. So, the male reproductive structure together is called as the androecium and the female reproductive structure together is called as the gynoecium. Androecium is made up of stamens in which the anthers are present where the microspores are produced inside the anthers in a structures called as microsporangia and megaspores are produced in the gynoecium. The megaspores of the flower is the ovule which is present inside the carpel, inside the ovary, okay, which is present in the carpel. So coming on to the type of flowers, flowers can be classified into different types based on its structure, oral arrangement, okay. So now what we are going to classify is, we are going to classify the flower into two types based on the presence of the male reproductive organ and female reproductive organ. That is imperfect flower and perfect flower. Imperfect flower are those flower which lack any of these orals, that is calyx, corolla, stamen and the ovary. In these orals, any of the orals if it is lacking, then it is called as imperfect flower in general. To be more specific, if a flower do not have any of the reproductive organ, that is either the stamen or the ovary, either the androecium or the gynoecium, then it is called as incomplete. If it has only androecium or only gynoecium where the other gamete producing organs are absent, then it is called as imperfect flower. If both androecium, that is male gamete producing organs, and the female gamete producing organ, that is gynoecium, are both present, then it is called as the perfect flowers. Based on this, we can classify the flowers into different types again, that is unisexual flowers and bisexual flowers. Unisexual flowers are the imperfect flowers where here either of only one reproductive organ will be activated, okay, dominant, that is uh, female reproductive organ. If the female reproductive organ is present in the flower, then it is called as gynoecious flower or it is otherwise called as pistillated flower. Example, Helleborus. And If a flower lacks the female reproductive organ and only it has only the male reproductive organ, that is the androecium, then it is called as androecious flower, or it is called as staminate flower. Example, Rus cupellina. Okay, so these are the flowers which has only one sex organ, whereas the other is not present. It is present on the other plants. But bisexual flowers are the flowers which has both the male reproductive organ and the female reproductive organ. Okay, so these are considered to be the perfect flower, or it is bisexual in nature. Coming on to the structure of the flower. The flower, almost all the flower on the earth crust, it has the main characteristics, a general morphological appearance. In few flowers it might vary in their arrangements, but in general almost all the flower has the same characteristics, so we can take it as a typical flower for the study of a flower. Usually the flower is found on a stalk like structure, a small thin stem which is attached to the thin stalk which is attached to the stem on which the flowers are present. These stem which bears the flower is called as the peduncle. If many flowers are present on one peduncle with small branchings of the stalks, then it is called as each branchings or each small stalk is called as the pedicel. If the flower is having the pedicel, it is called as pedicellate flower. Sometimes these flowers are directly attached to the shoot, so they do not have the small stalk to bear to bear it. They are directly attached to the shoot or the branch, so then they are called as the sessile flowers. Okay, so on the either side of the pedicels, you can see in some flowers, in some plants, you can see small leaf like structures which is reduced and modified. Sometimes it might be thorny in structures. These small modified reduced leaf like structures or thorns which is present on the either sides of the pedicel is called as the bract. So the plants which has the bract is called as bracteate plants, whereas some might not have the bract, then they are called as ebracteate. And sometimes bract is found near the calyx part in the floral parts of the flower. Okay, near the floral parts, these are called as epicalyx. There is a difference between calyx and epicalyx. Calyx is a or a floral part of the flower, whereas epicalyx is a modified leaf which is called considered as a bract. Coming on to the floral structure. The floral structure is found on the pedicel. These are found on a thick layer or disc-like structures called as the receptacle, which is a condensed or a modified or reduced internodes to form a thick disc. These are called as receptacles. Receptacles are otherwise called as thalamus, or it is called as torus. In the compound, receptacles are called as torus. These torus bears the floral arrangements. The floral arrangements, as I told you in the last slides, the floral arrangements are in 4 different orals. These orals are spirally arranged or it might be radially arranged. These orals are distinguished into 2 types, that is fertile orals, that is which is producing the gametes, and the sterile or the vegetative parts of the flower. Okay, so the 2 outermost part is vegetative in nature, they do not directly help in the reproduction or production of the gametes, but they indirectly support the formation of the gametes. These are usually vegetative part, that is which includes the calyx and the corolla. So these vegetative parts which do not involve in the gamete formation is called as perianth. The 2 outermost oral of the flower is called as the perianth. Perianth is a vegetative group of modified leaves which includes the petals and sepals. Petals together collectively called as the corolla and sepals together collectively called as the calyx. and inside the two fertile part of the flower is the androecium and the gynoecium. Androecium is a male reproductive organ which contains the stamens collectively called as the androecium, and gynoecium is a female reproductive organ which includes the style, stigma, ovary, and ovule, which is collectively called as the carpel. Coming on to the calyx. Calyx is the outermost part of the flower. It is a vegetative part. It is green in color and it is a modified leaf. These are photosynthetic in nature, and this calyx, okay, has leafy structures. Each leafy structure, each unit of the calyx is called as the sepals. These calyx are very important for the flower to protect the flower in its bud stage. So this is the flower of hibiscus. Here you can find the green color leafy structures called as the calyx. And below the calyx you can find thin leafy structures. This is not the calyx, but it is the epicalyx, which is a modification of the bract. Next is the corolla. Corolla is the second vegetative whorl of the flower, which is colored in nature. These corolla are having distinct colors, attractive in nature, and they have their own aroma, fragrance, and they might contain the nectaries also to attract the insect. So they are not directly involved in the gamete formation, but they help in the sexual reproduction by attracting the insects for the pollination process. These are also the modified leaf, but it is colored in nature. Sometimes these petals and sepals in some flowers, these petals and sepals will not be distinct, so they cannot be differentiated. The shape, color, function, or all will be the same. So the flower or the plants in which the sepals and petals cannot be differentiated, these oral parts are called as tepal. What are tepal? Tepals are the undifferentiated part of the perianth where the petals and sepals cannot be distinguished or differentiated. Coming on to the other structures, sometimes what happens here is the calyx, corolla, and androecium are fused together to form a cup-like or tube-like structures, which has the whorls of calyx, corolla, and the stamens together united on the ovary. These structures are called as hypanthium or floral tubes. And between the androecium, okay, there will be a disc-like structures which bears the nectars or called as nectaries. The third whorl, coming on to the third whorl, which is a fertile whorl which involves in the gamete formation, is the androecium. Androecium is the male gamete producing organ which includes the stamen. Many stamens together collectively called as the androecium. Coming on to the stamen is having two distinct structures, that is the lobed structure which is the modified leaf of megasporophylls. These are called as the anthers. The anthers are connected to a filamentous tubular structure, cylindrical tubular structure called as the filament. The anther is attached to the filament on a part called as a tissue called as the connective. Based on how the anthers are attached to the filament, there are different types of anthers, which we are not going to deal here. Okay, so inside the anther, there are usually the anther might be unilobed, which is called as monothecous. The lobed structure of the anther is called as the thecus. It might be unilobed, which is called as monothecous, or it might be bilobed, which is called as dithecous. If it is three-lobed, trithecous, four-lobed, tetrithecous, but usually the plants will have bilobed structure or anther called as bithecous anther. Each lobes of the anther will have a pair of sporangia, microsporangia, inside which microspores, mother cells are present, from which it undergoes the meiosis and produces the microspores, are otherwise called as the pollen grains. So anther is a structure which produces the pollen grains, and each anther will be uh, tetrasporangiate, means it has four sporangias in it, and each sporangia bears the microspore mother cell which releases the pollen grains after meiosis. Usually the anthers will be surrounded by the, or usually the anthers will surround the gynoecium, that is the female gamete, except in a family called as Triuridaceae, where anther will be surrounded by the gynoecium. Usually anther will surround the gynoecium, but in Triuridaceae, anthers are surrounded by gynoecium. Okay, so that is about the androecium. So this is the lobed structure of microsporophylls, where each lobes has two sporangias in it, and sporangia, it has microspore mother cell. Microspore mother cell undergoes meiosis to form the spores, microspores, which is called as the pollen grains. The fourth oral is the gynoecium. Gynoecium is derived from a Greek word called as gyne and oikos. Gyne means woman and oikos means house, which means the house of women, that is the female reproductive organ. So it is a female reproductive organ. It includes the stigma, which is sticky or feathery in nature, which helps in the collection of the pollen grains, and a long cylindrical structure, either it might be long or short. It has a cylindrical structure called as the stele, in which thin tubular structure called as style will be present, and below that it has a large chamber called as the ovary. Inside the ovary it bears the small ovules. It might be single or multiple in nature. It bears the ovules. So collectively, the structure with the stigma, style, ovary and ovule together is a female reproductive organ, and they are collectively called as the gynoecium. And these are otherwise called as carpels. Sometimes, for the reference sake, these carpels might be also called as pistil. Okay. So, in the female reproductive gamete, which is present inside the ovary, is the ovule. Ovule is the female reproductive gamete which has the egg cell in it, which undergoes the fusion to form the fertilization and forms the zygote. So this is the carpel, which includes the stigma, style, ovary, inside which the ovules are present. Based on the number of carpels present, it might be monocarpous, means some flowers has only one carpel. Okay, so it has one style, one stigma and one ovary which has the ovule. Mono, like this, if it is present, it is called as monocarpous. Some flowers might have apocarpous. Apocarpous means here it has two different style, two different stigma and two different ovaries. Okay, so two or three, many, if it is not fused and separately present in the same flower. If many carpels are present in the same flower without fusing, then it is called as apocarpous. Sometimes the carpels will be fused together, which appears to be a single carpel. Many carpels will be fused together to appear like a single carpel. These are called as syncarpous ovaries. So syncarpous in nature. Okay. Sometimes the androecium and gynoecium will be found together. These are called as gynandrium or gynostemium or gynosteum. The term is referred to express that when gynoecium and androecium is fused. So gynandrium, gynostegmium, anyhow you can call, these are the different terms. And androecium and the gynoecium are found on small stalk which bears the androecium and gynoecium are called as androgynopores. And this is the structure of the detailed structure of the flower, which is the reproductive organ of the angiosperms, which helps in the production of the male gamete and the female gamete after meiosis. The male gamete producing organ is androecium, the female gamete producing organ is called as gynoecium, which is otherwise called as carpel or pistil. Okay, so this is about the structure of the flower. If you all have any doubt, you can text me. I hope you have understood this. It is very simple to understand. Thank you.